The JFK Assassination Time Chart. After you hear Bruce Adamson tonight, you will probably never think about the Kennedy murder the same way again. This book, as I pick it up and look through it, it's not speculation. It's an assemblage of facts, and it's date related. It's all chronological, year by year, and it's truly amazing. You spent 5.5 years researching this. I don't know how you could do it. It's an awesome amount of information. Well, again, it's not subjective. It's factual.
It's factual, and I'll tell you how I came across this. Is I prepared a book, Oswald's Closest Friend, the George De Mohrenschildt story.
Very few people, unless they're really into conspiracies and studying the JFK murder, even know or have seen the name George De Mohrenschildt, an absolutely key figure in this whole thing. Before we get into the book itself, this assemblage of facts, which is exactly what it is, I have never come across anything like it, and to read through it, it doesn't leave much room for doubt. I mean, it's right here in your face in black and white. I mean, these are, again, not somebody whispering about somebody else. These are actual dates and times of people and events. I have never seen anything more Byzantine, a labyrinth of the most sophisticated, imponderable connections that just beyond belief.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I mean, it's truly amazing. And the average person will reflexively say, Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy dead, okay, some speculation, some controversy. But when you look at the facts here, ladies and gentlemen, it's amazing what Bruce Adamson has put together here. All right, Bruce, I'm going to let you start with the story now, and I'll stop you from time to time because there's so much to it. But
well, where do I start?
Let's start with Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone gunman, the man who did it all by himself, and let's spin off from there maybe some of the web.
It's very simple. What has happened in the past is that everybody's focused on Lee Harvey Oswald, hundreds and hundreds of books on Lee Harvey Oswald, and there are two pieces of evidence that pretty much clear him. There are a lot of pieces, but the two that I focus on is that when he's arrested by the Dallas police, he doesn't have any gunpowder nitrates on his face. Mm-hmm. And to me, if he was really aiming to kill the president through the scope, he would have been looking through the scope and looking right down, and he would have had nitrates on his face. And somebody does hit the curb 500 feet north of the motorcade. Mm-hmm. And what I'm assuming, there was a staged shooting where De Mohrenschildt is hanging out with Oswald on April the 10th, right around that time. And Oswald allegedly shoots at this right-wing general in John Bircher in Dallas.
Yeah, I remember that.
And both Jack Ruby and George De Mohrenschildt said it was a staged shooting.
I see.
And Ruby was offered a job with the FBI in 1960. De Mohrenschildt, I can prove, was CIA in the 50s.
Now, the link between De Mohrenschildt and Oswald, let's take a look at that. That's critical. Okay. How did they get to know each other, and what was their background?
Well, De Mohrenschildt works for the State Department in 1957. De Mohrenschildt and his brother, I have linked to more than 60 CIA agents. Mm-hmm. The founder of the CIA's Radio Liberty, which is still in existence today, emerged with Radio Free Europe, was founded by Dmitri von Mohrenschildt's closest friend, writer William Henry Chamberlain for the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. And William Henry Chamberlain was tied to CIA consultants and was telling Allen Dulles how to run his Warren Commission while in 1964, telling him to squash the Texas oilman theory. Well, William Henry Chamberlain had no way of knowing when he died, and he died in 1969, the same year as Allen Dulles, that De Mohrenschildt in 1976 was going to say that wealthy Texas oilmen were behind it, which is only part of the truth, and that De Mohrenschildt would end up putting say that Oswald didn't do it, and that he would put a shotgun in his mouth and do a final exit in Palm Beach, Florida.
That was what year?
Right after his friend George Bush resigned as CIA director, and after he was given nine shock treatments, which I believe killed him.
De Mohrenschildt was given 9 electroshock treatments?
That's right.
Under what pretense?
The doctor that ordered it, Dr. Asa DeLoach, was a cousin to FBI Cartha DeLoach, Lyndon Johnson's main man at the FBI.
I remember. See, now, those of you listening, this is what I'm talking about. Everybody knows somebody or is married to somebody who has a first cousin who is somebody in this thing, and it's so wild, and it's all true. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but George
it's fine. The listeners should know that I'm a genealogist, a historian, which I really get into analyzing the associations. I don't convict somebody, or I don't make something up. I just connect them to one another, and if the piece doesn't fit, I don't use it, or I don't force it in there to try to make up something, and I contacted the West Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, and I went through the court to get a hold of George De Mohrenschildt's personal phone book. And everybody that was entered in there, except that they were written in, were entered in 1954, 55. I pinpointed the date that they're entered in there. And I did research on everybody in the book to get to know and tie them to one another and tie them into De Mohrenschildt.
You mean you got De Mohrenschildt's book from the police department?
I did, yes.
That's not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, well, I told them that I'm a dedicated researcher and that I'd keep them posted of what I had uncovered.
Oh, interesting.
And that they don't have the time. They get
De Mohrenschildt's background, his ancestors. He's European. He comes over here. He ends up working for the CIA. How did he become such close friends with Oswald? Have you been able to nail that down?
Well, he said he was. He told a writer, Edward J. Epstein, who met with him the day he committed suicide, that he was asked by the CIA keep tabs to interview Oswald and check him out, and also through James Walton Moore, the local CIA agent in Dallas. But nobody ever really knew that George De Mohrenschildt worked out of a CIA trust building in Dallas, that's the Republic National Bank building, which was a law firm in the building organized JFK's motorcade route with the Secret Service.
Oh, really?
Yes, and that was Locke and Purnell. It's one of the largest law firms in Dallas, and they represent the Dallas Morning News as lawyers.
So right in the very opposite, George...
In the same building.
Same building.
The building, according to the L.A. Times and the Houston Chronicle, in 1969, they released that the building was under a CIA trust.
Interesting, very interesting.
And George De Mohrenschildt had worked out of there since 1950 to 58. But very interesting is that even though he moved out of the building in 58 and represented the State Department in 57 when he was one of the first Americans to represent the State Department, which also collaborates with the CIA, is that he goes into the communist country of Yugoslavia and meets with Yugoslavian politicians. But he's able to collect his mail and have a telephone in the number all the way up until 1968.
Wow. All right, so what do we have by way of Oswald and De Mohrenschildt hanging out together then over a long period of time? Do we feel that De Mohrenschildt was running Lee Harvey Oswald, or were they equals?
Well, people say that they have different ways of describing it, and their friendship people have jumped into the White Russian community that they're helping out, but circumstantial evidence that is compelling that proves a conspiracy is in April of '63. De Mohrenschildt is friends with Oleg and Igor Cassini.
The famous Oleg Cassini, the dress designer.
Who was Jackie's dress designer.
Jackie Kennedy's dress designer, Oleg Cassini. All right.
Okay, and Igor is listed in De Mohrenschildt's phone book in 1954-55. And Igor has married Charlene Reitzman, and Bobby Kennedy was prosecuting Igor Cassini for failing to register under the Registration Act, and I feel that Bobby Kennedy's prosecution was was hard on that it was overdone, and it shouldn't have been done so cruel and mean. And what happened is on April the 8th, Mrs. Igor Cassini, Charlene Reitzman, whose father, C.B. Reitzman, Charles B. Reitzman of Palm Beach, had been good friends with Warren Commissioner Allen Dulles since 1932. And Charlene committed suicide 2 days before the Walker shooting, when De Mohrenschildt was hanging out with Oswald at the Walker shooting.
Well, see, you just spun about 6 different webs on this big layout that are just already interconnected. So I'm going to back up. Jackie Kennedy's dress designer, the famous Oleg Cassini, had a brother named Igor.
They still have. They're both still alive.
Yes.
And Igor, I spoke to Igor, and he's very A very likable guy, very nice guy, and I can't emphasize that enough.
And De Mohrenschildt's relationship was with which one again?
Well, I did the genealogical background on both, and the grandfather of the Cassinis, Count Arthur Cassini, was the first Russian ambassador under the Tsar to the United States. At the same time, Ferdinand de Mohrenschildt, allegedly de Mohrenschildt's uncle, was ambassador to the United States before the Revolution.
So we've got this connection. Now we have De Mohrenschildt and Oswald. For how long of a period of time were they working together, hanging out together, associating together?
Not very long. And, you know, when I say he's his closest friend, it's pretty much facetious that, you know, if somebody is really involved with setting somebody up or
sure.
You know, they're not much of a friend, but when you look at George De Mohrenschildt and you study him and you see his motives and what his purpose, it's not as bad as not knowing. You understand the person much more. Well, I lived George De Mohrenschildt.
Again, Jackie Kennedy's dress designer, Oleg, now linked to De Mohrenschildt, who was...
And Jackie, too.
And Jackie, too. Now, how was that linkage? Jackie Kennedy...
Jackie's mother dated George De Mohrenschildt in 1938. And Jackie was honorary chairman of an organization that De Mohrenschildt had founded in 1955, and that was the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
Yes.
And even more chilling is that Jackie bought her clothes from De Mohrenschildt's alleged aunt-by-marriage clothing store, Nona McAdoo, in New York City, called Che Neon.
Wow, when you're digging this stuff up, your mind must be spinning at times.
When I make a discovery, I see it's important, original, you know.
And it's also a vein, isn't it, that runs into other things?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's blood and it's everything, you know. It's just there are connections. And another important thing is that every time Lyndon Johnson went to Palm Beach, he stayed at Igor Cassini's father-in-law's house. Lyndon Johnson is also in De Mohrenschildt's personal phone book, but he's written in...
Now you found this. You had the personal phone book. This is he's written in there. LBJ. De Mohrenschildt. It sounds to me like De Mohrenschildt knew everybody who was anybody involved with this.
That's the key, because Oswald's closest friend happens to know H.L. Hunt, the Murchisons. He met Hoover at the Del Charro Hotel in San Diego. He knows William S. Paley, who's working for the CIA throughout the 50s. There's 4 entries for CBS in De Mohrenschildt's phone book.
All right, let's take the De Mohrenschildt angle and follow it to George Bush now. What do we see there?
Well, we see many failures to disclose association. George Bush has admitted to me that he's known Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend since 1942.
Now, when you say George Bush has admitted to me, what do you mean by that?
Well, his office, Terry, wrote to me and has admitted that George Bush has known George De Mohrenschildt since 1942.
Well, I hope again, for all of you out there whose minds may be fuzzing in and out, stay with us, because you're going to continue to hear links and connections that are just amazing that you've never heard of before. So George Bush, his father, Prescott, do you feel, Bruce, with the discovery of De Mohrenschildt's phone book and the discovery after 5 years of research of all these connections and linkages, do you feel personally you've got a pretty good handle on what really happened to Jack Kennedy?
I've never been so sure of something in my life.
All right, now we're going to get to the exposition of your basic theory, and I've got to tell you that after all of the material I've looked at, you've presented me, I want to hear it. So tell us, in your view, what happened?
Well, there are a number of motives. Okay, I believe that De Mohrenschildt, friends with George Bush, has several motives. I found out that Warren Commissioner Allen Dulles, CIA Director Allen Dulles, and De Mohrenschildt's relatives, the McAdoos, De Mohrenschildt's uncle, Robert Lansing, De Mohrenschildt's grandfather by marriage, William Gibbs McAdoo, founded the Secret Service together in World War I. Well, I can prove that both of them knew this when they sat on the Warren Commission. I found a letter from CIA Director Allen Dulles to the brother of George De Mohrenschildt, Dmitri von Mohrenschildt, 3 days after he took over office in February of '53. And it mentions a gentleman by the name of Peter Vyryk's article that was printed in Dmitri von Mohrenschildt's Russian Review Journal. And Peter Vyryk is the son of George Vyryk, and George Vyryk was arrested during World War I by Robert Lansing and William Gibbs McAdoo's Secret Service.
See? For those of you out there, I told you, it's amazing. What's your view?
Well, I believe it's more CIA, and Alan Dulles, golfing buddies with Igor Cassini, was fired by Jack Kennedy over the Bay of Pigs operation, which was codename Operation Zapata.
Well, that's right. Now, let's talk about Operation Zapata, the key word being Zapata there, and what that means. I know, but I want to hear you tell us.
Well, George Bush's oil company was Zapata Oil, and several of the boats were the Barbara J and the Houston. When there was a George Bush of Houston making a mysterious phone call on the day of the assassination, and he happens to use the same address as the former president, and the middle initials HW. Well, George Bush doesn't remember making the phone call, but I can prove that he made the phone call.
Well, the phone call was made
to Houston FBI agent Graham Kitchell.
All right, why?
And the way I prove it is that both De Mohrenschildt and George Bush were friends with Graham Kitchell's brother, George. And Graham Kitchell, when he writes down George H.W. Bush in his address, recognizes his voice. When George H.W. Bush tells him that he knows James Parrott was talking about killing the president. Well, George Bush failed to make disclosure that he knew Oswald's best friend since 1942.
What was the venue on which he failed to disclose?
He talks about James Parrott speaking of killing the president, but he never makes disclosure as president when he signs the JFK Review Board into law, and they're spending millions of dollars trying to find out what happened in the JFK assassination. And a man named David Marwell, the executive director, has represented George Bush when he was president in going to Germany, is in charge of finding documents for the JFK assassination.
All right.
But they're not going through George Bush's Zapata records or his CIA file.
Mm-hmm.
And when George Bush became CIA director in '76, there were 3 congressional investigations looking into the CIA's role into JFK's assassination. But George Bush failed to make disclosure that he knew Lee Harvey Oswald's closest friend since 1942.
That's a long time.
And it is. And the 3 congressional investigations were the House Select Committee, began in '77, the Rockefeller Commission, and the Church Commission.
Wow.
And San Francisco Chronicle published an article when Bush was CIA director in '76, where Bush admits that more than 200 documents are missing from the CIA's file.
Dear Jeff, does your guest know any of the evidence, or of any evidence, that either Ruth Paine or her brother profited from the assassination?
Yes, I have a whole volume dedicated to that, and that's their parents were Michael Paine's stepfather, Arthur Young, was the inventor of the Bell helicopter, and I just have uncovered startling new evidence. Mrs. Arthur Young was Ruth Forbes Paine, and her husband, Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, he made millions off the Vietnam War, off of each helicopter sale, and Fletcher Prouty notes in his book that they lost 5,000 Bell helicopters. So the new evidence is that Dmitri von Mohrenschildt's spiritual advisor, Payson Loomis, for more than 50 years, they graduated together in 1927 at Yale, was the best friend of Arthur Young and Mrs. Ruth Forbes Paine. And this is so heavy, and the appendix is so good, and it has photographs, and Arthur Young's partner in the helicopter designing was pilot Joseph Mashman, LBJ's personal pilot.
It gets to be absurd, these people, how they were interrelated. Just amazing. De Mohrenschildt went to Harvard?
No, he went to Harvard, but didn't graduate. He graduated from Yale.
I see.
And he wrote his thesis at Columbia.
That's Dmitri
von Mohrenschildt. That's his brother.
Where did George go to school? Do we know?
George went to the University of Texas. And has a degree in geology there.
So that's how you got to know George Bush so long ago?
No, he got to know George Bush because Dmitri von Mohrenschildt was the stepfather to George Bush's roommate at Andover and at Yale, and they went into the Navy together, and that would be New York Stock Exchange member Edward Gordon Hooker.
Wow. All right. Second part of this question. How about any of Oswald's brothers? Did they profit from the assassination?
Robert Oswald offered to give him a free set of the De Mohrenschildt story, and he refused it, and he's been making a killing off of interviews. But a real nice guy, when I talked to him on the phone.
Yeah.
But still, he doesn't want to look at the George De Mohrenschildt side.
Understand. All right, last part of the question.
A free copy we offered them, and I will give your listeners a discount if they're interested. Okay.
Does your guest know anything of the U.S. Army fellow who went AWOL in Germany before the assassination and tried to warn Robert Kennedy of the assassination through Swiss embassy officials? He was arrested before the assassination and later court-martialed and held allegedly in an asylum. You know anything about that? That's news to me.
No, but I have a very good friend, Dr. Newport, down in L.A., and he typed up the only book written about Oswald prior to the assassination. Prior to the assassination, Dr. Newport typed up Kerry Thornley's book, Idle Warriors, which is a fictional book about Lee Harvey Oswald when he defects to the Soviet Union.
Right.
And I interviewed Billy Joe Lord, who was Oswald's roommate, on the boat to the Soviet Union when he went in 1959. And Billy Joe Lord's boss, he was harassed just before De Mohrenschildt committed suicide by the last person to interview De Mohrenschildt, and that was Edward J. Epstein and his writers. They wanted an interview, and he wouldn't give it to him, and he was harassed. And they threatened Billy Joe Lord, who was Oswald's roommate, that they were going to go to his boss.
Bruce, this book of yours, every time I open it up and look at a different page, I see something interesting. And, how do you sleep at night? I mean, this stuff must swirl in your head.
Well, it's good when you have an attorney for the state of California who works for the state of California, who's won a couple of death penalty cases supporting it, who was a skeptic of conspiracy theories in the beginning, has now gone over and even written a book review. And as a genealogist, I get into the roots and the associations and the ties, and I really I get in there and I examine and I bring them together.
You know, all the conjecture and that cloud of obscurity seems to melt away when you look at the book that you put together here. It does become very clear. What about LBJ's connection? Now, LBJ, from all I can gather, was probably not too surprised at what happened. Maybe he's surprised at the time of the month.
No, I can prove that he was just as much involved as Allen Dulles.
All right, let's talk about some of that.
His friend, Allen Dulles. And the reason...
His friend, Allen Dulles. Now, you said that. That's a very important statement.
Okay. And the reason is because on April the 8th, Charlene Wrightsman commits suicide. Now, Lyndon Johnson is the watchdog for the oil industry. Charlene Wrightsman is the daughter of C.B. Wrightsman, who is the president of Standard Oil of Kansas. But more importantly, Charlene Wrightsman's grandfather was the author of the oil depletion allowance, which the Kennedys wanted to reduce. And that's one of the motives up there right at the top. That's one of my top motives, which has been created by other writers long before me.
Yes.
The thing is that Charlene, she commits suicide on the 8th. Oswald allegedly shoots at Walker on the 10th. De Mohrenschildt is writing to Lyndon Johnson on the 17th.
Of November?
No, of April. 7 months.
Okay, so we're way before, all right.
Way before. The 18th, Lyndon Johnson is writing to De Mohrenschildt. On April the 26th, the CIA supplied a document to the House Select Committee that De Mohrenschildt met with this person, and they blacked out the name of who he met with in Washington, D.C. Well, they didn't know these two. When the CIA supplied this memo, they didn't know the two letters between De Mohrenschildt were even there, where Lyndon Johnson offers to meet with De Mohrenschildt in the following week on April the 26th. Right when De Mohrenschildt is meeting with Lyndon Johnson, snipers take shots at Papa Doc in Haiti at his and kill the bodyguards to his children. And when De Mohrenschildt has a perfect cut alibi where he's in Doc's estates in Haiti at the time JFK is being assassinated.
All right, let's think now. Are we talking that in your mind was De Mohrenschildt one of the prime movers and who designed this actual hit?
Yeah,
let's talk.
But even further is like you look at Igor Cassini's father-in-law, C.B. Wrightsman, and I think I was making this point before when C.B. Wrightsman in '55, C.B. Wrightsman and De Mohrenschildt's in-laws, the Sharpless oil people, formed this big Goya ball in Palm Beach together. They were the directors of this ball, including Mrs. E.F. Hutton. Well, Charles Reitzman was also a trustee at the Museum of Modern Art with 4 other associates of De Mohrenschildt's. One of the associates, Philip C. Johnson, architect in New York City, designed the JFK Memorial in Dallas. The other trustee was Henry Luce, who buys the Zapruder film. Henry Luce employs Dmitri and George De Mohrenschildt and is dating the same. All the 5 trustees are also connected to Warren Commissioner Allen Dulles. William S. Paley works with the CIA, admittedly. CBS founder Prescott Bush had been a director for 20 years, one of the longest directors. William S. Paley is listed 4 times in De Mohrenschildt's phone book, employed De Mohrenschildt at the Shelter Rock Development Corporation, offshore oil speculation.
That phone book is a pretty amazing thing to have been able to get hold of.
Oh my God! I saw it was just. To me, it was like gold. Discovering
that
gold.
Opened it all up. It's almost like Marilyn Monroe's alleged diary, which disappeared very quickly. How about William F. Buckley? What's his relationship in?
Well, I was the last trustee. I'll mention him, then I'll get who is tied to William F. Buckley too. Is Nelson Rockefeller.
Okay.
Nelson Rockefeller employed De Mohrenschildt during World War II in inter-American affairs, and is tied to De Mohrenschildt's brother through the president of Dartmouth College, John Sloan Dickey, and a number of other individuals, including Henry Lowe's.
What about William F. Buckley? I want to ask you that. I know Jack Valenti's name is here. A lot of people who are very active today.
And they're all somehow connected to De Mohrenschildt.
Well, of course. Now, I am too. I must have a relative that knew him somewhere. But what about, here's the name, Aristotle Onassis. Let's start with that one.
Okay, well, Aristotle Onassis' good friend Basil sold C.B. Reitzman, or rented a huge yacht in July of '63, a couple months after his daughter committed suicide because of Bobby Kennedy. And C.B. Reitzman's closest friend and neighbor, one of his closest friends, was another Manchurian-born Russian oil man who's friends with De Mohrenschildt. De Mohrenschildt had worked for William F. Buckley Sr. and also Nelson Rockefeller's oil companies.
Okay, so William F. Buckley Jr., now how does he figure into this?
Well, there's a William F. Buckley listed in De Mohrenschildt's phone book. And I've written it says Buckley Brothers and Company, New York City, and I wrote to Reed Buckley first, the brother of William F. Buckley Jr.,
yes.
And I asked him who was the Buckley Brothers in the 50s in New York City. He goes, well, that's my brother's oil firm that were running for my father. Okay, and then I wrote to William F. Buckley Jr., and he said that's a different Buckley family altogether.
Aha.
And then, so then I started looking at Buckley, who's friends with William Henry Chamberlain, and members, Buckley and Dmitri von Mohrenschildt are members of the Elizabethan Club at Yale with Henry Luce.
Now, George Bush must not be far behind there, too, then.
Well, then you have they're both Buckley and the Bush are members of the Skull and Bones organization with Neil Mallon, the founder of the CIA's Dallas Council on World Affairs. Who
inspired George Bush to name his son Neil.
And hired Bush in '48 at Dressers Industries, which is known to work with the CIA. De Mohrenschildt commits suicide in '76.
Do we believe that, or was he taken care of?
Well, he could kill himself and it'd still be murder, but prove that the CIA was the one that gave him the shock treatments is a hard case.
Right.
So
was there any evidence that De Mohrenschildt was in Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination? There have been several people claiming that they have photographic
It's kind of odd because he's friends with the person that could have done it would have been the Murkisons, who are throwing a party the day before.
Now, when you say could have done it, what do you mean?
Well, the Murkisons own the other airport, Addison Airport.
Right.
There are no logs for the planes that go in and out of Dallas.
Okay.
They also own a meat packing plant in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, where De Mohrenschildt's living with Papa Doc on his estates, having a special contract with the Haitian government. Well, De Mohrenschildt says he knows that Oswald killed President before he even heard that Oswald had been arrested. This is what he testifies to the Warren Commission.
He being he?
De Mohrenschildt.
Testified. De Mohrenschildt said that?
Yeah, he testified to that. But then he has another version when he was at Parkland Hospital before the shock treatments, while Bush was CIA director. De Mohrenschildt's roommate passed a stress analyzing test, saying that De Mohrenschildt claimed to be harassed by the CIA while Bush was CIA director. Well, Bush claims 5 days after De Mohrenschildt committed suicide that De Mohrenschildt was being harassed by the FBI. But it's funny because De Mohrenschildt and Bush were writing to one another, and the letters are disappeared, like those other 200 documents of while Bush was CIA director. But the thing is, it's so important because of all these failures to make. The important thing is that De Mohrenschildt was given 9 shock treatments about 2 months after he was writing to George Bush.
Okay.
And the letters are gone. They mention these letters, and they're not no longer. The CIA doesn't have the letters between George Bush and De Mohrenschildt.
Well, you've got one of the most interesting pieces of evidence I've heard in years regarding this whole JFK assassination.
And I couldn't believe it in the beginning. I swear on the Bible. But like the one letter between Allen Dulles and Dmitri von Mohrenschildt in '53.
Yes.
Is so crucial.
It is. All right. We'll take a little pause here. Okay, we are back talking with Bruce Adamson about his book.
Is that when Oswald's arrested, he doesn't have gunpowder nitrates on his face, and somebody does shoot the curb 500 feet north of the motorcade.
Yes.
Both Jack Ruby and De Mohrenschildt said that the JFK shooting and the Walker shooting were staged. That suggested that Oswald thought he was partaking in a staged plot to scare the president into using Secret Service.
Yes, I've heard that too.
And when he goes up there, he holds the rifle. That would explain why he holds the rifle to his chest, and he's not looking down the scope with a vindictive means of trying to kill the president. He's holding the rifle to his chest, and he shoots the curb because he does whatever he's told to by the CIA.
Sure, or De Mohrenschildt.
Well, De Mohrenschildt was allegedly in Haiti at the time.
Allegedly, okay, but we have some people with photographs saying that De Mohrenschildt was right there. Who knows? It's tough to pin that.
But we know that De Mohrenschildt's wife worked with Abe Zapruder, who filmed the entire event.
No,
and Olga Femur, Olga Femur's daughter Marie, was Lyndon Johnson's personal secretary.
Amazing. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we have another caller holding for Bruce Adamson. Remarkable stuff from his timeline.
Mary Farrell, the top JFK researcher in Dallas, hung up the phone on me, but very important is that her granddaughter married George De Mohrenschildt's grandson.
This is so amazing. This is a large fraternity sorority kind of a grouping that you've unearthed here. And
if your granddaughter, I'll just say it, the conflict of interest is if your granddaughter had married Oswald, the grandson of Oswald's closest friend,
right?
Wouldn't you want to protect your granddaughter or son from having to be that shame? I would. It's only natural. Sure. There's nothing corrupt or sinister about it. It's only human love. And I mean that's only natural. But the thing is, I don't really care. All I want to do is be remembered as having done a good job, and that's all I want. And give the listener 5 years, what it took me 5 years to understand and to research, and $120,000 of my money for nothing. I'm just trying to
trying to bring history into focus is what you're trying to do.
And correct the past. If we made a mistake, let's get it right, and then we can go on to something else.
How about Gerald R. Ford?
Very close to Richard Nixon.
Yes. And
throughout the 50s, they were very close. So was Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush helped get Nixon elected as vice president in Eisenhower.
Jerry Ford, any other particular attraction to this whole thing, besides having historical ties with Richard Nixon?
Had a vendetta against the Kennedys in '63. He was going to say, we're going to send the Kennedy out of the homes, send him out of the White House into one of his other homes. He was very, very hostile. But he may have just been more of a cover-up. I don't think he was, personally, Gerald Ford, I don't think was involved in any kind of sinister plot to kill the president. And I think he was more, but he hired Nelson Rockefeller, who had employed De Mohrenschildt.
Do you expect any of them to not necessarily contact you, but to try and put this information together and leave it posthumously for the world to consider?
I doubt it. Nobody wants to remember for the bad things that they've done. They want to be remembered for the good things they've done.
That's true.
And they have a way of blocking things, mentally blocking things out. We need to get it right, because the big loser here is Lee Harvey Oswald and his family. And never mind the Kennedys. I mean, the thing is, if Oswald wasn't the shooter, that's the worst thing that any group of people could have done to a human being on Earth, is to give somebody the blame of something that they did not do. And that's the noblest thing that we could do, is to point the blame at the real people that did it. And how would you like? What if you were the son or daughter of Lee Harvey Oswald and your father was innocent?
That's a pretty noble motivation you have for trying to bring this out. Certainly part of it. And if wrong has been done to people on such a scale as that, it's almost incomprehensible.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like a debt that America can never pay back.
Yes.
And we have to pay it back, at whatever cost. I feel it needs to be corrected.
Well, it's very, very interesting.